Hey, good morning. It's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. This Thursday will be 80 years since thousands of Japanese Americans were sent to concentration camps. Today, we'll hear how younger generations are learning about this history and keeping memory alive. Yoko Fedorenko is here to talk about her family's story of incarceration. But first, let's get you caught up. The union push at Starbucks across the country came home to Seattle yesterday. Workers at the company's Broadway and Denny location on Capitol Hill voted unanimously to organize their store. Seattle Times reports 6 more around the city are planning to do the same. Starbucks said after yesterday's vote that it will bargain in good faith and hopes the union does the same. The producer of the city's annual Pride Parade says Amazon sponsorship isn't welcome at this year's event. Seattle Pride said yesterday it's parting ways with Amazon over its contributions to anti-gay politicians. They also pointed to the more than 40 similar organizations allowed to receive customer donations through the Amazon Smile program. Amazon employees are still welcome to march in the parade. And with the concrete strike dragging on and critical public infrastructure projects delayed, King County has a new idea. Why not make its own concrete? Yesterday, King County Executive Dow Constantine said the local concrete industry is failing the community and called for a study into a public partnership that could avoid the labor stalemate like this one that's holding up the completion of the West Seattle Bridge. The idea probably won't help the immediate supply issues, though. The report won't be complete until the end of this year.
Hello?
Hey, Grandma.
Yes.
Hey, it's Yoko.
Oh, Yoko, how good of you to keep in touch.
That's Yoko Fedorenko, chatting with her 90-year-old grandmother, Lois Morishita. Yoko says she's one of her best friends, and they talk a lot.
How's it going?
Pretty well. It's a beautiful day here.
Through their conversations, Yoko has learned about her grandparents' time in U.S. concentration camps. 80 years ago this week, Lois and thousands of Japanese Americans were sent to concentration camps around the U.S. It was just weeks after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, leading to mass incarceration.
Evacuation. More than 100,000 men, women, and children, all of Japanese ancestry, removed from their homes in the Pacific Coast states to wartime communities established in out-of-the-way places.
Yoko's grandmother lived in L.A. She was sent to a camp in Roar, Arkansas. She was 11 years old. And just 10 miles west of Seattle on Bainbridge Island, more than 200 people made up the first group in the country to be removed from their homes and sent to Minidoka Camp in Idaho. Yoko Fedorenko is here to talk about her family's history and how it still resonates today. She's a 2020 UW grad and former founder and president of the university's Nikkei Student Union, an organization for Japanese American students on campus. She's also a member of the Minidoka Pilgrimage Planning Committee and Suru for Solidarity, the Japanese American-led movement to end immigrant detention in the U.S. Yoko, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your family's experience. Really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
So it was so great to hear you chat with your grandmother. What have you learned from her about your family's incarceration?
Well, I have heard a lot from her over the years. I first learned of the incarceration as like a concept or a thing that had even happened to my family because my mom was really intentional about making sure that from a young age we understood what our family's story was. So when I was, I want to say 6 or so, my mom bought us a children's book about the incarceration. The main character was a young girl about our age who was experiencing that herself. It was called Flowers for Mariko. And she brought it with us to our next trip to LA to visit our grandparents and had them read it out loud to us and then let us kind of ask any questions that we had. And then after that, you know, over the years, I've actually gotten to talk to my grandparents a lot about it. I ended up interviewing both of them a couple times, actually. Kind of anytime there was like a school project where you get to choose what you want to do. I would choose this, and I would talk to them. And I have the transcripts of those interviews, and it's really cool to see how they, framed this history to their grandchildren who are kind of learning about the world and how that works in tandem with learning about what that meant for our family.
Your mom, like you said, has been very open about talking with you about this throughout your life. How did she share the importance with you?
I think my mom really helped us be proud of the fact that they had survived this thing. It had been something that was really shameful for a really long time, and she really wanted to make sure that we understood it as something that was not to be pushed aside and hidden and be ashamed of. It was something that, we could look back on and understand that our people went through a horrible thing, and our existence is proof that they survived. And one interesting way that this stuff reveals itself is names. And, my name is Yoko. And so one really simple way that she began the process of kind of healing from this cultural trauma is she named me and my sister Japanese names. And for her generation, that's totally unheard of. Her and her siblings have very kind of Anglo-American names. And I remember asking her, why did you name us Japanese names? My grandparents were not thrilled about that idea because, they're taught you shouldn't stand out. Don't give anyone any chance to remember that you're Japanese, right? But she really felt strongly that we were to be named Japanese names. And I asked her one time why, and she said, because I wanted you to know who you are.
That sounds like a really important moment between you and your mom, creating a sense of identity. And you're part of a community of young people who are educating people about this history. You went on a pilgrimage to Minidoka with your grandmother. What was that like?
Minidoka was the site where most Japanese Americans in Seattle were sent. And the pilgrimage is basically a time to gather together and remember what happened. And we get to be at the site. And so that's been really important for me to continue to be engaged with this history in the community. And my grandma actually came on the pilgrimage a few years back, which was really amazing.
Tell me more about that. What does that mean to you, to make that pilgrimage, to be there?
I mean, it's weird. It's unexpectedly joyous at times. And then it's also unexpectedly, it's an intense weekend. It gets really emotional sometimes. It's everything at once. But being there in that place, where these things happened, I don't even know how to describe it. It feels like you can connect on a certain level. And so you really get to, kind of put yourself in those shoes. And then also the stories that come out while we're there, people start talking. One of my main roles as part of the planning committee has been to do the elder panels at the pilgrimage. And lately they've been virtual, but just being around people who have experienced this and are sharing things for the first time at 80, 90 years old, it's an honor and it's really amazing.
Do you think that for some of the people who take this pilgrimage, that it is a healing experience for them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For the older generation, for the people who actually experienced it, we talk about transgenerational impacts and the way that my grandparents impacted my mom and then my mom impacted me. And people a lot of times focus on that flow of direction when they talk about intergenerational stuff. There's also, it goes the other way too. It flows in the other direction. And the younger generations, it's been amazing to see how our work has influenced our grandparents and the people who grew up with parents who would never speak about this. Now they'll talk about it at an elder panel in front of an audience. And that would have been unimaginable, decades ago. They can see the younger people setting this example of this history and your story. We respect it and we see it and we're not ashamed of it. It's been so cool to see people their whole attitude towards what happened change.
You know, I'm glad you brought up the generational change that is occurring, because I wonder what the fifth generation's role is going to be here. You just mentioned seeing the dialogue change in a very positive way. How do you see their role moving forward?
It's funny, the Gosei or fifth generation, they're usually a little younger than me, but I know quite a few. And I think the analysis of it becomes more and more complex. Like for a lot of Sansei, third generation, it was about their parents and getting justice for them. And kind of just this reckoning, oh, this history exists, it's important. And then a lot of generations after that, or Sansei later in life, come to this idea of like, oh, this is important. This same thing is happening today. It's important for us to make that connection. A really common phrase you'll hear is that we have to be the allies that our families didn't have during World War II. And then I think the generations going forward, you just start connecting the dots more and more. And it's like contextualizing this history in terms of like white supremacy and understanding that there were so many layers of oppression going on during the incarceration. And like as a community, this whole model minority thing, understanding how we have been weaponized against other communities of color. And a really common thing like with newer generations is the idea that our oppression is inextricably linked to other communities. And so therefore, so must be our liberation. But yeah, I'm excited to see. And then who knows, like, who am I to say what the Gosei are going to do? But I'm excited to see whatever it is.
Yoko, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. It's been great.
Yoko Fedorenko is a member of the Minidoka Pilgrimage Planning Committee and Suru for Solidarity. Coming up on March 30th, there'll be a commemoration event at the Bainbridge Island Japanese American Exclusion Memorial, where Governor Jay Inslee will speak, joined by survivors. You can find out more in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Jenny Cecil Moore produced today's show with help from Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our theme music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.